Okay, hi there. This is a quick video on a multi-step trigonometry question. That's going to be a trig question where you have to use often two different triangles. Very common theme is that there might be something you have to calculate from one triangle that then is also in the other triangle, and then you do a second calculation to get the thing you actually want. So let's take a look at this. So we've got a diagram here, and the question says solve for x given that triangle ABC is a right triangle and side AB equals 100 centimeters and angle A equals 44 degrees. You can see there's a bit of bad formatting here, and I just copied this straight because this is the formatting, unfortunately, you're going to get in the question you're doing online. So I might as well just show you. They just accidentally printed that D to label this point on the same place where they wrote the value of C, the side C. Remember here that, so this is angle C, big C over here, big B angle, big A angle. I remember the naming convention that across from angle A is side little a, across from angle B, big B, is side little b, and across from angle big C is side little c. So that's where that came from. And then they just added this extra point in here because they wanted to divide the triangle into two separate pieces, and they labeled that D, and you can see the labeling just went a little wrong. So looking at this, our first goal would be to see if we could do this in one step, right, instead of two steps if possible. So we got two little right triangles here. Let's look at each of those quickly. We're hoping to find x, right? What do we know in this left triangle, triangle BCD? And it is a right triangle because this line, we got that little right angle marker there, right? So that means both sides of that are a right angle. So in this triangle, well, we don't know A, we don't know x because that's what we're trying to find. We don't know any angles, and we don't even know this side here. We know the whole thing is 100, but there is no indication that that has been cut in half, right? There's no reason to think that this is 50 and 50, so we don't know this side either. We know nothing in that left-hand triangle. And again, this angle here we don't know because even though the whole thing is 90, there's no reason to believe this has been cut in half. It's the two together make 90, but what is each one? We don't know. Okay, so the left-hand triangle is kind of useless. Let's look at the right-hand triangle. We don't know x because that's what we're trying to find. We don't know b, it's an unknown. And we don't know this for the same reason as before. We know the whole thing is 100, but that doesn't mean it's been broken into 50 and 50. It could be 60 and 40 or 65 and 35, who knows. We do know one angle, at least 44 degrees, but without knowing any of the sides, that's not going to be good enough to make any calculations there. So here's what we're going to do. We notice there's one more triangle there. This whole thing, ABC, if we cut out, just erase that middle part for a while, that is also a right triangle. Now we've erased the thing we're trying to find, x, right? But maybe we can use this big triangle to find a useful piece of information. What do we know in the big triangle? Well, we do know something. We know that the hypotenuse here is 100. And we know one of the angles is 44. We could figure out the other angle if we wanted to, but we don't need to, because remember, all the angles add to 180. So we know a side and an angle. That is enough to use SOHCAHTOA. We could find A if we wanted, or B if we wanted. We could find both if we wanted. Let's try and figure out which one's going to be more useful. If I look quickly back at the original diagram here, if I knew A, that would be the only thing I know in that left-hand triangle. I still wouldn't know any other sides or angles. That is not going to be enough to calculate x. But if I knew B, I would know one of the sides in this little right triangle here, and I would know an angle. That is going to be enough to work in that little right triangle to find x. So let's go erase that again. We're going to use this big triangle to try to calculate B is our goal here. So let's label up the triangle. Here's the right angle. So across from the right angle, right, directly across, that's the hypotenuse. here's the 44. That's our reference angle. That's the angle we've decided we're going to use. Across from that, we call the opposite. And the one that's left behind, we call the adjacent. And let's look now. The question we always ask ourselves is, what sides do we know and what sides do we want to find? So we know the hypotenuse is 100, and we said we want to find side B here, which is the adjacent. So we know the hypotenuse and we want the adjacent. We write out SOHCAHTOA, and we are looking for the piece that has the H and the A, right? Because from our question about what we know and what we want to find, we identified hypotenuse and adjacent. Take a look here. The sine piece has O and H. The tan piece has O and A. The cos piece is the one we want. It is the cos piece that has A and H in it. All right, and now from here, we can write our equation and solve it. This should be something you've done a lot by now. If you don't know how to take it from here, you probably actually need to go back to the earlier questions and try the more basic ones before you're trying this two-stepper. So we write our cos, we chose cos, so we write our cos equation. Cos 44 is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse, AH, right? The adjacent is B and the hypotenuse is 100. And again, you should be well practiced with how to solve this equation. Whether you turn that into a ratio, some people like to put the cos 44 all over 1 and do some cross multiplying. That's great. Or you might multiply both sides by 100. That's also great. Whatever method you use to get to this here, 100 times the cos of 44, and then plug that into your calculator. I would calculate cos 44 first, and then once you have that decimal on your calculator, multiply by 100. You get 71.93398, and I kept some extra decimal places there so I don't get a rounding error in my final answer, because I'm going to have to use this number here. A lot of people will cut this off. They'll say 72 or 71.9, and then you're going to go take that number and do further calculations with it, which means that you might carry that get a rounding error in your final answer. So I'm going to keep those extra decimal places. Let's go back to our original diagram, except now we know some more information. We know that B is equal to 71.93398. Okay, so let's erase the left-hand triangle now and just work with this right-hand triangle, because we now have enough information. We have an angle at a side. Let's label it up. There's the right angle. Across from it is the hypotenuse. Here's the 44, our reference angle. Across from it is the opposite. And the leftover one is the adjacent. Notice that in the big triangle, this side here was the adjacent, but in this little triangle, that side is the hypotenuse. So things might change around as you work with different triangles. Ask ourselves the questions. What do we know? What do we want to find? We know the hypotenuse right here, and we are trying to find the opposite because that's what the question is asking for. So we know the hypotenuse, we want the opposite, write SOHCAHTOA, look for the piece that has an O and an H in it. Well, there it is, the first one, the sine piece. So let's write our equation. Sine of 44 equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. Sine of 44 equals the opposite x over the hypotenuse. We could have put b there, but we might as well put the number because we know what the number is, right? Again, you should know how to solve this equation from here. If not, go back and practice the more basic types before you're tackling a multi-step trig word problem. So you should end up with x equals 71.93398 times the sine of 44. Again, I would work out the sine of 44 first, then multiply by that number, and you will get 49.97 centimeters. By the way, if you've got everything right and you're not getting these answers, double check that your calculator is in degree mode, not rad or grad. So it's got to be in DEG. Easiest way to tell is look at the top of your screen, and it'll say DEG or RAD or GRAD, or it might just say D or R or G. If it's not in the right mode, you need to use your mode or your setup button. There's various ways to do it. It's different on every calculator. If you don't know how to get that into the right mode, give me a holler and we'll help you figure that out. Okay, hope that helps and have a good day.